The sound of the baby's cry sliced through the calm hum of the airplane cabin like a blade through silence. Passengers exchanged glances, some irritated, some sympathetic, others pretending not to hear. But there was no escaping it, the sharp, desperate wails of a baby who didn't understand altitude, pressure, or exhaustion. Near the window seat in the first-class section, a sharply dressed man in his early 30s fumbled helplessly, sweat beading on his temple. His tie was loosened, his expensive watch gleamed under the cabin lights, but the weight in his arms, the restless baby, seemed heavier than all the wealth he possessed. He was a millionaire, but at that moment, he looked utterly lost. If you believe in kindness, compassion, and second chances, then please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Thread. Your support helps us bring more real, heartwarming stories to life. The man's name was Ethan Carter, a young tech millionaire who was used to solving impossible problems in boardrooms, not in the cramped aisles of an airplane. His baby, Oliver, had been crying non-stop for nearly an hour since takeoff. Flight attendants had tried to help, offering warm milk, a pacifier, even toys, but nothing worked. Ethan's face revealed a mix of exhaustion and guilt. This was his first trip alone with his infant son since losing his wife, Grace, 6 months earlier in a tragic car accident. Every sound from his baby felt like a reminder of everything he'd lost. Grace had been the calm to his chaos, the warmth to his cold precision. Now, he was left alone, trying to figure out fatherhood between meetings, board calls, and lonely nights filled with lullabies he didn't know how to sing. Passengers started whispering. A woman across the aisle shook her head and muttered something about rich people who don't know how to parent. Ethan heard it. It stung. He wasn't angry at her, just ashamed that maybe she was right. He looked down at his son, whose tiny face was red from crying, his little hands clutching the air for comfort that wasn't there. Ethan whispered softly, "I'm sorry, buddy. Daddy's trying." But his voice trembled. Just a few rows behind, a young woman had been watching the scene unfold with quiet empathy. Her name was Clara Evans, a single mother traveling back home after visiting her sister. She wore a faded denim jacket and carried a simple bag that had clearly seen better days. Beside her, her own baby girl, Lily, slept peacefully in her arms, her little face serene and content. Clara had noticed the men struggling from the moment she boarded. She could see the pain behind his eyes, the way he rocked the baby awkwardly, as if he wanted to do everything right but didn't know how. She recognized that feeling too well, the fear of failing someone who depends on you completely. For several minutes, she hesitated. She didn't want to intrude, and besides, who would believe that a stranger, especially a woman traveling alone, had the right to step in? But as the baby's cries grew louder and the father's panic deepened, Clara felt something stir inside her heart. She couldn't sit still anymore. She quietly stood, walked up the aisle, and gently leaned toward Ethan. "Excuse me," she said softly. He looked up, surprised, embarrassed, maybe even defensive. But before he could speak, Clara added, "I think I can help." Ethan blinked. "Help," he repeated, confused. Clara nodded and, with genuine kindness in her eyes, whispered something that made the people in nearby seats pause in disbelief. She said, "I have breast milk. My daughter's about the same age. I can feed him, if you're okay with it." For a moment, silence filled the cabin. Ethan froze, unsure what to say. It was such a personal, unexpected offer, something that defied social norms yet radiated pure humanity. He looked down at his baby, whose cries had turned into weak whimpers, and then at the woman offering to help, not out of pity, but out of compassion. His eyes welled up. He nodded slowly, his voice breaking as he whispered, "Please, please help him." Clara sat down beside him. With delicate care, she positioned Oliver in her arms, and within seconds, the baby's cries softened into silence. The change was almost magical. The restless energy in the cabin dissolved as the tiny child finally found comfort. Ethan watched in awe, his throat tightening with emotion. Passengers who had been annoyed moments ago now looked on quietly, some with tears in their eyes. As Oliver fed peacefully, Ethan leaned back in his seat, his eyes glistening. He couldn't believe that a stranger, someone with nothing to gain, had done something so selfless. The rhythmic sound of the plane's engines and the calm breathing of his son felt like a lullaby. For the first time in months, he felt a strange sense of peace wash over him. When the baby finally drifted into sleep, Clara handed him back with a gentle smile. Ethan could barely find the words. "Thank you," he said, his voice trembling. "You have no idea what this means to me." Clara just shook her head. "You don't have to thank me. I know what it's like to be alone with a crying baby, wishing someone would understand." The rest of the flight passed quietly. Ethan couldn't stop glancing at Clara and her daughter. He noticed the small details, the frayed edges of her jacket, the faint tiredness in her eyes, the way she kissed her child's forehead with such warmth. He realized she didn't have much, but what she did have was something no money could buy: empathy. When the plane landed, passengers began to gather their belongings. Ethan stood, holding Oliver in his arms, and turned to Clara. "Can I repay you somehow?" "Anything you need," he asked. She smiled and shook her head again. "Just promise me you'll be patient, with him and with yourself," she said softly. "That's all he really needs." As she walked away, disappearing into the crowd with her sleeping daughter, Ethan felt an ache in his heart, a strange mixture of gratitude and admiration. He wanted to say more, to offer her something, to thank her properly. But somehow, he knew that what she gave him wasn't something that could ever be repaid, it was a moment of grace. Weeks later, Ethan couldn't stop thinking about that day. Her words echoed in his mind whenever Oliver cried or when loneliness crept into his nights. Be patient, with him and with yourself. It became his mantra. Slowly, he learned. He started reading parenting books, taking time off work, spending evenings just talking to his son. And somewhere in the quiet, he began to heal, not just as a father, but as a man. One morning, while feeding Oliver, he opened his laptop to check his company's email. A new charity proposal had landed in his inbox, a small foundation seeking donations for single mothers struggling with childcare and employment. The name caught his breath, Lily's Light Foundation. It was Clara's. Without hesitation, Ethan smiled and donated a generous sum anonymously. But more than that, he included a note that simply read, "For the kindness that changed my life at 30,000 feet. If this story touched your heart, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Kindness Thread. Your support helps us share more real stories that remind the world that compassion still exists." And before you go, tell us in the comments, what's the kindest thing a stranger ever did for you? Because sometimes, it only takes one act of kindness to change a life forever.
Y la jubilada que no lo conoce.
Que la Quinta de Olivos haya tenido más registro que un telo, boludo, no, tampoco me resulta algo favorecido para ningún presidente, boludo, pero sin embargo, se tiene con cualquier cosa. Por eso no tiene sentido para mí ninguna de las dos. O sea, ninguna de las dos llega. O sea, por más que la política esté o sea, esté mucho más en nuestra vida día a día, es o sea, el propósito y el fin y con lo que se llega es la misma mierda que eso. Podemos empezar a hablar de cristianismo con los protestantes y va a ser la misma discusión.
No pregunté Huáscar, es los audios de Milei. Lo último que salió de la última polémica. Que a mí me hace
La
mucha
última
gracia.
actualización, boludo. El
La
último
última
filtrado, el
actualización,
último leak.
el último filtrado es Huáscar en la cara. Y me da mucha gracia.
Y hay video, todo.
¿Eh?
No te imaginas. Escándalo.
Hay un video cumeando a la putita
La
Donorem.
foto.
La foto de la
Sí.
putita Donorem.
La ponen una figurita de plástico y le hace la cumya.
Oh, qué rico.